2 Kings chapter 5. 2 Kings chapter 5. I had a homiletics professor named Dr. Ed Wilson. Dr. Wilson spent 20 years as a chaplain in the Army, 4 tours of duty. He spent 20 years as a missionary to China, and then spent 20 years pastoring a church. He was a great man of God. And he's in heaven now, and I'm kind of glad he is, because he would give me a D- for what I'm about to do. This message doesn't really have a rhythm. It doesn't have an order, but I believe in my heart it's for us tonight. And we're going to do something in storytelling you're not supposed to ever do. We're going to give away the ending, and then we're going to go back and work our way back to it. We're going to give away the ending. 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 13. 2 Kings 5:13 says, Naaman's servants went to him and said, My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more than when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? Little things. We're going to talk tonight, just a few minutes, about little things. 2 ways to come to notoriety. If you lived in the time of 2 Kings, the 2 quickest ways to be powerful as a man of God in that time frame is, number 1, to be a prophet. Prophets were highly regarded. There was no weather channel. There was no internet. There was no newspaper. There was no prognosticators. There was no predictions. The prophet rose to a high level very quickly. The second way was to become a valiant soldier. You could overcome. You could win battles. So here's the story of Naaman. Verse 1, Now Naaman was a commander in the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. So let me tell you what Naaman developed and what Naaman executed and what made him so valuable to his king. He learned that if you would take small bands of the best soldiers and go into Israel at night and overtake people in small villages and small groups, not only could you win the skirmish, you could bring back the valuables, and you could also bring back people. You could kidnap and bring back people. So he was a reconnaissance soldier. He was highly effective at what he did, sneaking in at night, overcoming, bringing back wealth. Now bands of raiders, verse 2, from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said, Mistress, if only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. Now, this is a bizarre story. If you didn't know this was in the Bible, and they sold this just as a regular book, you wouldn't believe it, because it doesn't make sense. It's very weird. All right, so here's what's happening. Naaman is leaving at night, going and capturing these people with these little bands of soldiers. One night, when they went in, they defeated the little group and brought this teenage girl back, and he made this teenage girl his wife's servant, her mistress. His wife became her master. The little girl hears that Naaman has leprosy. And this is what she does. She tells her master, Naaman's wife, if only he could go to Samaria and see the man of God there, he'd be healed of his leprosy. Now, y'all, what sense does that make? If they kidnapped me and made me a servant, and I heard he had leprosy, you know what I'd have told him? I heard if you'll drink diesel fuel. I mean, why is she worried about him getting healed of leprosy? She's a kidnapped and been turned into a servant. It's very bizarre. It gets weirder. All right, here we go. If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. So Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. And this is what the king says. By all means go, the king of Aram replied. I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So Naaman left and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter he took to the king of Israel said, with this letter, I'm sending my servant Naaman to you so that you can cure him of leprosy. So even weirder that this young girl tells Naaman how to get cured. I want you to follow me now. Stay with me. The very country they've been pillaging, the very country they've been sneaking into and destroying, the king who's been destroying them writes a letter and wants his best soldier to be cured of leprosy. Now let me ask you this. When he gets cured of leprosy, what's he immediately going to start back doing? It makes no sense. It makes no sense that the king of Aram thought, I'll just write a letter. Now, he did send some goods. I looked it up, and the equivalent, a couple years ago, the equivalent to the goods that he sent in today's time was just short of $6 million. He sent all kind of shekels, all kind of gold, outfits, chariot. He took them in there on a chariot. Now, if you're the king of Israel, you're in a quandary. I mean, can you see them pulling up? Say, hey, king, somebody's coming over the hill. Really? Who is it? Man, I don't know, but they got chariots. They got gold. I don't know what's going on. But they got a letter for you, and he reads the letter. Let's see what happens. It gets weirder. Verse 7, as soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, am I God? Can I bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to be cured of his leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me? So the king of Israel thinks it's a trick. It's just a trick. They're just trying to justify being able to come in here and start some trouble. Verse 8. When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message. Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know there is a prophet in Israel. Now, all right, so here we go. We got the chariots with the shekels and the gold and the money and the outfits. They parked at the castle, at the king's. Well, the king comes and tells them, what I need you to do is go around the corner and down the hill and take your third right, your third hard right, and there's a guy that lives there named Elisha, and you need to go talk to him. Now, it's one thing to pull up with chariots and gold and all that money at the king's place, but in the subdivision, down the hill, it probably looked a little weird. He pulls up to Elisha's house, and Elisha has already promised him, if he'll come see me, I'll prove there is a prophet in Israel. All right, we're getting to it. Stay with me. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Verse 10. Elisha sent a messenger out to him and said, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored and you'll be cleansed. But Naaman went away angry and said, I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. So the first thing Naaman lost was his temper. And the reason that he lost his temper is he had a preconceived idea of how God had to help him. Me and you don't get to have preconceived ideas of how God has to help us. One of the maddest I ever been, I was on full-time staff with my daddy, and I was my dad's youth pastor for 10 years. And 1 year, it just drew on me. I was in charge of benevolence. And our church was not in a good part of town, so we got a lot of knocks on the door. Can you help with my light bill? Can you help? And we always tried to do the best we could. And I had a guy come up one day and said, I hadn't eaten in 3 days. I said, well, I'll be right back with the church van, and I'm going to carry you to Burger King. And he said, could it be Captain D's? I don't know why. That just bothered me. I took him to Captain D's, but I'm telling you, I was spitting fire. I was so mad on the inside. If I ain't eating 3 days, I'm not worried about where he's taking me. We have these preconceived ideas of how God's going to lead you, how he's going to set you free, how he's going to heal you, and we don't get to do that. I mean, can't you see it now? Naaman's got this big idea. Surely, I thought the man of God would come out of his house with his robes blowing in the wind and a light shining around him. And surely he would call upon the name of God and wave his hand over my sore. And we got all this. And I'm talking about Elijah didn't get out the lazy boy. They said, he's here, Elijah. He said, all right, go tell him to dip in the river, the Jordan River 7 times. It infuriated Naaman. He's furious. He walks away mad. How many times have we, if we'll be honest, become mad with God because he didn't give us the answer we wanted? Or he didn't do things in the timing we thought he ought to do them. And we've got this preconceived idea of him walking out and calling upon the name of the Lord and waving his hand over us, and that's how we're healed. When God can heal us, he can save us, he can set us free any way he chooses to do it. Thankful Naaman had a servant. So first thing he loses is his temper. He becomes angry. But verse 11 again, but Naaman went away angry and said, I thought he surely would come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned and went off in a rage. Here we are back at 13. Naaman's servants went to him and said, my father, if the prophet had asked you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? So he went down and he dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. He lost his temper, but then you know what else he lost? He lost his pride. He had somebody come to him and said, Master, if he'd have told you to do some great thing, how come we really only want to do great things? Why do we get bored of the small things God calls us to do? I have one thing I have to do every week. It's a very small thing. God definitely called me to do it. Nobody sees me do it. I do it with love for the Lord, but it's a teeny tiny thing that I do every week. And there was a time when I started getting a little attitude about it, and God showed me quick. This is something I've called you to do, and this is something I want you to do, and I want you to do it from the right heart, and I do. Small things. Small things. Churches are built on people doing consistent small things with the right heart. Yeah, I mean, any church not going to grow if somebody's not in the nursery loving on babies. And I don't consider that a small thing, but I do consider it something that's not seen. It's not seen a lot. Small things. God calls us all the time to be faithful in the little thing. Let me ask you this. Do you think if, let's just say that one Naaman went to Elijah's house, what if Elijah would have said, go back, get your 10 best soldiers. I mean, go get Rambo, go get the Equalizer, go get G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip. I mean, go get them. Go get the baddest soldiers you got. And here's what I'll tell you. If you can bring me back 100 dead Israelites in 24 hours, I'll cure you of your leprosy. How quick you reckon he'd have went back and formed him a posse? And would have been glad to do it. That's a great thing. That's a challenge. That's a big thing. But what about the little thing? I had a Sunday school teacher named Nellie Grindle. If you've ever heard me the story about growing up in fear that I had missed the rapture and calling that little old lady, and when she would answer the phone, I'd hang up, that was Nellie Grindle. Let me tell you what she did. She lived till she was 90 years old. She taught Sunday school till about her early 80s. She taught first grade, boys Sunday school, her whole life. That's the class she loved. That's the class she wanted. And I'm not exaggerating to you. At Evangel Temple in Columbus, Georgia, Nellie Grindle taught the first grade boys Sunday school class for 40-something years. She developed, when she first started, a habit of writing each one of those boys something on their birthday, something in Christmas, and then 2 or 3 times during the year, write them a note. And she would always say, keep in touch. That was her tagline, keep in touch, keep your eyes on Jesus. When Nellie Grindle passed away, she had one of the biggest funerals I've ever seen in Columbus, Georgia. And soldiers and CEOs and firefighters and coaches and insurance salesmen came to her funeral, and they would tell how they had been getting birthday notes, a Christmas card, and an encouragement throughout the year for 30 or 40 years. These guys are in their 40s and 50s. And for all those years, as long as you would keep in touch with her, let her know where you are, you would get that card. Now, some people say, come on, man, could it just build an email? You know, just build a group email and you know, put it on a spreadsheet. I don't even know what a spreadsheet is. That just sounds computer savvy. I wouldn't know one if I saw one. Just customize it. Let's make it fast. Let's make it efficient. Nope. Handwritten. Handwritten. And they came all the way from all over this country to pay a tribute to somebody who learned the importance and the power of a small thing. Of a small thing. Quit waiting on God to call you to greatness. He's already given us a blueprint. He's given us the Great Commission. I'm not saying the Great Commission is a small thing. Here's what I'm saying. He's given that to all of us. We're commanded to do it. Let's get about doing it. Let's get about doing it. Let's be busy about His business. Consistent. Small. That servant runs Naaman down. Surely, if he'd asked you to do something great, you'd have done it. Why don't you just go dip? So I looked up, of course, the Jordan River, still the Jordan River, but I looked up those other 2 rivers, and still to this day, they are beautiful, beautiful rivers. Postcard picture kind of rivers. And the Jordan in places, I don't know if you've ever been to the Jordan River. I've been twice, and I'm telling you, there are parts of it, you can jump across it. Some parts of the Jordan River are not gorgeous. But he swallowed his pride. Hey, That's something that doesn't come natural to me and you, and we better be consistently practicing doing it. Swallowing our pride. Listen, as dads and even granddads, we need to put into practice that we can sit our wife down and say, hey, just want you to know, I blew that. You were right. I was wrong. I'm sorry. And if you'll forgive me, I'm going to try my best to never do that again. As dad and granddads, we need to be able to sit our children down. Say, hey, I lost my cool right there. That was not right. And I'm sorry. Because we have to teach to them the beauty of being able to say, not my will, God, your will. And to swallow pride. Now, we've all got people in our family, I don't care what happens between now and the rapture, they ain't going to tell you they sorry. Y'all looking at me all holy and pious, but we've all got them. I got somebody in my life, close in my life, that they're not going to say they're sorry. All of a sudden, one day, they just start being extra sweet to you, and you know it's over. No, there's no discussion, no my bad, my be, just kind of cold, and then one day the coldness is left, and they're just being super nice to you. I don't want to be that guy. Man, if I make a mistake, if I'm in the wrong, I want to be able to have the character to swallow my pride and come say, man, I was wrong there. We have to learn to swallow our pride. And sometimes we have to say it out of the right heart, maybe before we entirely mean it. Just say it till you mean it. If your heart's right and you're trying to do the right thing, you can say it till you mean it. I mean, all of us in here at one point have had somebody wrong us. They come say, sorry. And we smile and say, it's okay. I forgive you. The Lord forgave me. I forgive you. And in your heart, you want them to wreck their car on the way home. You do. You said the right thing, but you ain't there yet. You know. Sometimes we start saying it, and then the Lord will help us get there if we're saying it authentically out of the right heart. We have to learn to say that. I can see Naaman now. Y'all, look, let's just walk back through his day. He brought $6 million to the king, and he thinks the king is going to petition on white horses to bring the prophet to the castle. That didn't happen. He rides around to the double wide, got a screen door, and he's picturing in his head, oh, he'll come out. He may even levitate out here. He may float out here on a cloud. Wave his hand over and declare, he don't even get out of his chair. Now, I can see him because I've been there. I know some of y'all ain't made silly mistakes and had to be chastised by God. I have. And he walked down that river, and he's going to run his mouth about how the rivers are back where he's from in Damascus. He's running his mouth. And you know what he does? He said, I'm finna get in this creek, and I'm going to dip 7 times. I'm going to do what God's asked me to do, even though it doesn't seem logical, even though it seems like a small thing. And the third thing Naaman lost in that moment was his sores. He lost his lumps. He lost his boils. He was healed of an incurable, highly contagious disease. We are willing to do what God calls us to do and tells us to do, even if it's small. You know, I don't want to be Nellie Grindle. I don't want to be writing them cards every week. I love preaching too much. But I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I hope you hear me. I hope you hear my heart tonight. If he tells me to shut my mouth and not never stand behind that podium again and go to writing cards, I'm going to do it. I'm willing to do what he's called me to do. I'm not going to have preconceived ideas or have levels where I can only serve. I'll close. I got one more story. You may have heard this story before, but it ain't going to hurt you to hear it again. I don't know if you have or not. You know, it amazes me, a guy will write a song and it's a hit. He can sing that song for 35 years. The guy got a good story, he ain't supposed to tell it but one time. That don't seem hardly fair to me. I don't know if you'll remember, I'm sure some of you will, but in 1994, some of y'all weren't here, but in 1994, late in the spring, there was a severe ice storm that hit the deep south. It was in April, as a matter of fact, and it kind of caught us off guard, and it shut down everything. Y'all know how we are. Amory's just like Alabaster. We get a dust and a snow. You can't buy bread and milk from Tallahassee, Florida to Charlotte, North Carolina. I've never understood how bread and milk help you combat the snow. You can't find it nowhere. But this was not really snow as much as it was ice, and it was dangerous, and power lines were down everywhere. So here's what was happening. I was working for my dad, and my dad only let me preach on Sunday morning one time a year. It ain't that he didn't love me, and it ain't that he didn't believe in me. My dad loved to preach. I mean, so National Youth Day, the youth would take over the service, and I'd get to preach. And my dad had been given a timeshare in Asheville, North Carolina. He's up in Black Mountain, North Carolina, at a timeshare when the storm hit. They're up there breaking kitchen chairs and trying to burn them. I mean, they're freezing to death, but it was bad where we were too. So it's Saturday night that thing hits, and we can't have church. There's no way we could ask people to drive in that, and it's my Sunday. And I can promise you this, he's not going to come home and say, well, since there was an ice storm, we'll let you preach next Sunday. Let me tell you what he's going to say. The ice storm is a sign from God. You wasn't supposed to preach in this church in 1994. So I get up this morning, it's on me to get the word out. So, back then you'd watch the news and it'd be a scroll of what churches and schools had closed. And that's all I knew to do. I called the newspaper office, and we had a brand new piece of high technology called a phone tree. So you would call one number and leave a message, and it would start calling all the numbers in your Rolodex. So I got that going. And then I had one, he was a deacon in the church, a good brother, still is, a great brother. He came and he said, Lee, I got some snow chains, and we're going to put them on the van and go check on. We had 6 shut-ins, people that didn't have family. We just felt like we needed to go check on them. So I met him down there about 6 o'clock in the morning at church office, and we driving around this church van. And we actually had to move a couple of them in with folks. I mean, they were shut in, no power, no nothing. So we get back to the church. We're not having church, and there's ice everywhere. And after we did what we had to do, I was thinking, man, this is a little sad. And I lived in a little bitty church parsonage in the parking lot of the church. And I go back up, and I don't know how, but we had not lost power or TV or nothing. We were good to go. And I'm sitting there, and I remember flicking through some hunting shows, and I'm a little mad at God. I'm like, man, I was ready. And now I'm not going to get to preaching. And I just didn't know what to do. So we had this guy in our church. He was an older guy named Brother Leroy. Now, Brother Leroy, I'm not being mean-hearted, and I'm not being critical. I'm just being accurate tonight. I love Brother Leroy. I'd die for him. But he had 2 things. He was slunched over real bad, but he had a really distinct body odor. Now, he was not an unclean man. I don't know how it happened. He had just a real unique body odor, and he had a severe speech impediment. And you had to been around him a while before you could understand him. I loved him. He would always find me when we had eating meetings after the church. He said, Brother Lee. I said, yeah. He said, what they going to do with all that boo left over in there? I said, I don't know, Brother Leroy. Get you some plates to go take much as you want home. You, my buddy, Brother Lee. He was just a great guy. Well, I remember one Sunday, my dad, before he would preach, we would take him in this room off the side of the stage. They called it a library. I do not know why they call it a library, I was there on staff 10 years. I never saw a book in there. But we would take the pastor over and pray over him right before he preaches. Nobody bothered us. Everybody knew where we were. We're in there praying for him one morning. And I'll never forget, I heard a knock on the door. And opened up, Brother Leroy just shot right in. He went straight to Daddy. He loved my daddy. He said, Pastor Mike. He said, yeah, Brother Leroy. He said, I need a job in the church. He said, everybody's got a job. I want a job in the church. I said, okay. Daddy said, I'll tell you what, Brother Leroy. He said, I get here at 6:45 in the morning. He said, we leave on Friday night and the front yard's immaculate. But I told you we weren't in a good part of town. He said, I come and it takes me about 30 minutes and I walk the front of the property and I pick up stuff people throwing out of their cars, just trash, beer bottles. He said, if you would come and do that, Brother Leroy, not only would it be a blessing to me, it'd be a gift to this church. Y'all, I'm telling you, it may be a Sunday school teacher didn't come and didn't call to tell us, but that churchyard was immaculate. He took pride in that. Matter of fact, he appointed himself our parking lot attendant. We had 188 spaces, and you could be the second car there, and he would guide you into your space. He had signals and everything. Brother Leroy. About 2 or 3 weeks after Brother Leroy started his job, we're back there praying in that same library for church over my dad, and we hear open it, and in walked a religious spirit. Now, I don't know if you've ever encountered a religious spirit, but they are the meanest human beings on this earth. They way meaner than any heathen or pagan you've ever run up against. They're self-righteous. They have critical spirits. And it's not about who can we bring in here, Pastor. It's about who can we run off. It's not inclusion, it's exclusion. They're mean. We had a couple of them. One of them walked right in that room. He said, Brother Mike, I need to talk to you. Daddy said, well, we're praying. He said, it won't take but a second. He said, you know, Brother Leroy's greeting people at their cars. He said, yeah. He said, is he the first person we want people to see when they come to our church? He said, he stinks. He said, is he really? And, you know, I got so much to be proud of my daddy. My daddy pastored for 40 years, retired about 18 months, and went back to work as a seniors pastor. He had Bible study today. He told me he had 80 people at their seniors Bible study at North Highland Church in Columbus, Georgia. I got so many things to be proud of my daddy. But when I think he's a man of God, I go back to this second in this story. Because when that old mean-spirited religious zealot came in there and said that, my daddy didn't even blink. He didn't hesitate. He didn't hitch. He leaned in that old boy's face. He said, he sure is. He said, boy, if they can see his heart, that's what we're after. So it's ice down that day. I'm flicking through hunting shows, mad at God. I look out through there. I said, Wendy, is somebody out there? And Wendy goes over to the window, pulls the curtain back. Lee, somebody's in the parking lot. I said, what? They know there ain't no church. I went out there on the porch and looked. Brother Leroy. I said, Brother Leroy, come here. I said, we ain't got church today because of the storm. I said, come on in and warm up, and then I'll carry you to your house. I got some snow chains on the van. I'll carry you home. And I'll never forget, I opened the door, and when he walked past me, I hadn't seen it. I guess I just wasn't paying attention. And when he stepped in the threshold of that door, he set down a bag of trash. And the Holy Spirit gripped my heart. He said, what if you cared half as much about your job in the kingdom as he does his? What if you had half that old man's heart? Little things. I remember when I was pastoring a church in South Georgia when Brother Leroy died. I was back. We had Sunday morning, Sunday night service still then. I was brand new into this pastorate. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, between churches, Daddy called me, which was rare. We don't never talk on Sunday. I said, hello. He said, Lee, we just had a funeral at church. I said, really? I didn't know that. Whose was it? He said, Brother Leroy's. I said, Daddy, why didn't you tell me how to come? He said, that's exactly why I didn't tell you. Because I knew you'd try to come up here. I know you loved him. He loved you. He said, but Lee, you'd be so proud of our church. He said his family came. He said it was so well attended, and they just treated his family like kings. He said, you know what, dog, I talked to you, man. He said, I was looking in the paper. You know, he passed Friday. I was looking in the paper, and his death didn't affect the Dow Jones any. I didn't know where he was headed with that. He said, well, you know, a lot of times a powerful man dies. The right powerful man dies, it'll affect the stock market. I said, it didn't? He said, no, sir. He said, I didn't see nothing about it on the news, the local news. And I'm thinking, well, Dad, I don't know why you would. He said, you know, the only thing I read in the newspaper was an obituary we wrote and paid to put in there. He said, but I'm telling you this, buddy, and I want you to hear me. He heard them words that me and you want to hear. He heard them, Lee. Well done, good and faithful. Little things, little things. Bow your heads with me. Lord, we refuse to get angry with you because of preconceived ideas. Lord, whatever you would have us to do, whatever you would call us to do, we're willing to do it. One of the reasons that Mark and Chrissy are so phenomenally successful in FCA is because that's their heart. I've been with them many times when there's an event and they're behind the scenes doing the little things to make it go. The little things. Lord, I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm going to do what you've called me to do. It doesn't have to be a great thing. It doesn't have to be a great thing. For what you've called me to do, I'm going to do with the right heart. I'm going to do it consistently, and I'm going to do it in love. And Lord, I tell you what else. We don't want to be people who refuse to swallow their pride. Refuse to admit we were wrong. Lord, thank God for the servant who ran Naaman down and just posed that question. Surely if he'd asked you to do something great, you'd have done it. Why not even more so go wash in the river and be clean? Lord, help us not only to have friends and brothers and sisters in the kingdom that are willing to do that, but help us to also be that kind of brother and sister to others. Lord, we're not, pride comes before a fall. We're not going to be prideful people. We're just not going to do it. And then, Lord, when we obey you once again, the promise is proven true. Lord, you promised us that you were going to come back, and I believe in my heart, I believe I'm going to see it before I die. I believe that my whole heart, because you keep your word. Jesus, you promise us, or Father, you promise us you'd never leave us or forsake us. I believe that word tonight. I believe that word tonight. Lord, you told us in your scripture if we would be faithful to confess our sin, you'd be faithful and just to forgive us our sin and to cleanse us from unrighteousness. Lord, find us faithful, big and little things. Lord, give us a humble heart. Give us a godly heart. Give us a sweet spirit. A spirit like Brother Leroy. In your precious name we pray.